For a little over 400,000 ringgit, you can now get BMW's flagship electric vehicle. This is the iX xDrive40 Sport. And we're going to take a very quick look at what is the best EV in the country. My name is AIMAN ABDULLAH. This is MalaysianMotoring. This is our review of the 2022 BMW iX. Now the thing about the iX is it's not only an electric BMW, but it's also BMW's flagship electric car. So there's quite a lot riding on this. So in addition to it being about the size of an X5, it's also got the biggest battery pack currently available on a BMW, which gives it a fully charged range, a claimed fully charged range of about 420 kilometers. Although in the 1200 kilometers that we've had with this car, 100% yields about 380 to 400 kilometers. It depends very highly on how you drive it. And of course, if you use more of the electric performance, you're going to use more of the battery, so you have to be considerate of that. But the thing about the iX is that because it is a new energy, a new generation BMW, they really have sort of thrown the book out with this car and sort of tried to design this car from the ground up, which is why the cabin is so airy. And in terms of the way you sit and the experience that you have around you, it feels very different from any other BMW. The window line is very low. You have an excellent view out all around the car except over your shoulder where the C-pillar is a bit thick, but then again, most modern cars suffer from the same issue. And between the reinterpretation of the infotainment system, where it now sits on these two sort of freestanding widescreen displays, and the almost complete lack of buttons, it means that driving this and sitting in this feels like a very different experience. So for those of you who want that new generation vehicle feel from an EV, this will likely appeal to you. And for those of you who want just a regular car that happens to be electric, then maybe not. And now we have to talk about styling, because I suspect that that is an area where a lot of people have a lot of opinions. Now, the iX is meant to look like a next generation vehicle, and that is perhaps why it looks the way it does. I love the slim headlights and tail lights with the little laser light integrated into this, because this is the iX Sport. And I do quite like the front end treatment of this car because it does work against this color, but the grille remains slightly unforgivable. I understand that it's meant to hide the sensors in it, and I do appreciate that it comes with that self-healing technology, but it is a little bit offensive. And down the side, it does look very reductive with those nice built-in door handles, but the lack of lines does sort of show the size of this car. And at the rear, with its slim tail lights and that wraparound design, you can really tell that this is a large car. For better or worse, this is ultimately about the size of a BMW X5. But because of the way it's been designed, there is a lot more space inside, which I certainly appreciate. The other thing I can't forgive is this, because you can't access it. And there is a lot of real estate space in here where I could have put chargers. Now, having spent about 1,000 kilometers in this car, or 20 hours in total, I must say that what I love the most is the interior. It is very different from other BMWs in the sense that everything has been cleaned up and made to feel and look a lot more minimal. But the overall treatment is certainly something that I like. I love the fact that you have a flat floor with this floating center console with a dual tier level of storage where I can put my fast charger and wireless charger down here with a couple of USB ports. There are USB-C ports everywhere in this car. There are 2 here and 2 on the back of each seat, which is certainly very nice. And because this is the iX Sport, we also get the crystalline iDrive controller, volume knob, gear selector, start-stop button, and seat controls on the door. Yes, there's seat controls on the door. This is not a Mercedes-Benz. But what I think is perhaps the biggest highlight in this car is the screen, where it is 2 screens. Ultimately, you have a digital instrument cluster ahead of you and a much larger iDrive screen on your left. Now, the reason why I like these screens are because, one, they're incredibly high definition. Both of these screens are incredibly high definition, and it's incredibly responsive and very easy to use. And I love the fact that even though this is ultimately a touchscreen, you still have the controllers here, because when you're on the move, it's a lot easier to use this instead. And I love the operating system, because this updated operating system means that everything is now a lot easier to access. It's very, very easy to use, and all of the tiles are very easy to access and see. You have all the information that you want at a glance, which I absolutely adore. The one thing I don't like, however, is the fact that because they've done this whole minimalist reductive thing, they've also stuck the HVAC controls in the screen. So if you have Android Auto running to get navigation, for example, if you want to adjust anything else other than the temperature, you have to hit the climate menu, and that takes away the screen. So if you're looking for directions, you better hope and pray that what you see here and on the heads-up display is clear enough for you to see. Now that brings me on to the heads-up display, because this car does come with one, and once again the heads-up display is very, very clear and very, very crisp. It's a full color heads-up display, it's very large, and because of this new operating system, the graphics on it have been overhauled, and it's now much easier to use than before. BMW has had one of the best heads-up displays on the market for a while now, but this has to be one of the best, if not the best, we've ever seen. The only car that I think that can come close to this is the new Mercedes-Benz S-Class with the augmented reality navigation system that you can get in the screen, although that said, the S-Class in our country doesn't get it. You have to upgrade to a MyBart for that. But yeah, this is a very nice cabin. A quick aside though, while there is plenty of space in the rear and the big windows mean you get plenty of light, and you do have rear ISOFIX mounts, passengers have complained that the ride in this car in the back makes them a little sick. But the experience of sitting in here is only half of the equation, because obviously there is a lot more to this car than just the way the interior looks. The way it drives is also kind of different. So for example, the power delivery is obviously instantaneous. Because it's an electric car, there is no engine to spool up, there are no turbos that might lag, it's all just... And it's a slightly addictive experience if you ask me. The ability to simply get up and go from anywhere, which I've personally quite enjoyed while merging onto highways, because you enter the highway at the normal speed, and the next thing you know, you're doing 110 on the fast lane within like a really short time span. And I really quite enjoy that. And when you're on back roads, you can also exploit that immediate torque, because overtaking is a lot easier too, thanks to that instantaneous torque. You need a lot less space in order to overtake safely, which I certainly appreciate. But what amazes me is that while the power delivery is very different compared to other BMWs, because obviously this is electric, what amazes me is the fact that this car still steers like a BMW. The immediacy of the steering wheel is particularly noteworthy, because you get a surprising amount of feedback, which compared to older cars is maybe about 10% out of this car than what you get from a proper older car with a hydraulic steering wheel. But it's still better than most other electric cars, and it gives you a sense of confidence behind the wheel. And despite the fact that this car weighs about as much as a small moon, BMW has tuned the suspension in such a way that it really manages the heft very well. So it's not the most agile vehicle out there, but then again, you'd be hard-pressed to find an electric car that is truly agile, because they are all heavy. But it still has a certain BMW-ness about its dynamics, where when you're driving on the motorway, for example, it controls its heft very well, gliding over lumps and bumps for the most part. And when you're trying to shuffle it through corners, it manages the weight quite impressively. Sure, you will still be able to feel the weight if you were to really drive it like an idiot, so don't. And if you don't, everything remains nice and calm. And when you're cruising at higher speed, you will most certainly appreciate the fact that this car has excellent NVH levels. So for example, when you're driving at speed, all you hear for the most part is road noise. Owing to the fact this car has very large wheels, so naturally you will get a little bit of road roar. But even compared to vehicles like the Porsche Taycan and to some extent the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the amount of wind noise that you get in this car is impressively low. This is despite the fact that this iX only comes with single pane glass, where a lot of other EVs use double pane windows. And despite that, the amount of noise ingress that you get from the windows, either from ambient noise or from wind, is very minimal. So the noise intrusion to the cabin is very impressively low. It's even quieter, as I said earlier, than a Porsche Taycan, which is a car that costs more than double this, which I find to be quite impressive. And then we have to talk about the BMW iX's safety credentials. So obviously this car has a full 5-star Euro NCAP rating because it's incredibly safe, and this car does incorporate a carbon core in its construction, making it slightly lighter while still maintaining a good amount of rigidity and safety. But more importantly, when you talk about the active safety, because I think that's what a lot of people will be interacting with more often. So the BMW iX in Malaysia, it doesn't matter if you get the luxury or the sports like the one we're driving today, they come as standard with BMW's full gamut of active safety systems. So you have full level 2 semi-autonomy with adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and autonomous emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, as I mentioned. And so that does mean that this car is capable of driving itself through traffic to some extent, as well as on motorway drives. Now, in terms of the competence of these systems, I try to use these autonomous systems as much as possible, especially when I'm driving in town, because I feel like that's the best way to figure out how competent these systems are. And where some cars, AEB and ACC systems, tend to be very overzealous, the one from BMW tends to be quite good. It seems to predict distances very well. It doesn't get too freaked out by bikes and whatever flotsam you may encounter on the roads in Kuala Lumpur. And that continues to be the case with the iX, where bikes and stuff cutting through your lane and stuff like that will not flummox it. It remains very calm and very steady throughout. And that does mean that when you're driving in town, once you've removed the vibration of the engine and you can enjoy the Harman Kardon audio system in this car to its fullest extent, it does mean that town driving is relatively stress-free. And the best part about electric cars is where town driving can be very wasteful for internal combustion vehicles, electric cars do better at slower speeds. So you end up using less kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers compared to the liters per 100 kilometers you'd be wasting in a petrol-powered car. So that's a good thing. And when you're driving on the motorway, what I certainly appreciate is the fact that the full color heads-up display shows you the lane, it shows you the cars around you, and it gives you an idea of what the car can see at any given time. So by keeping my eye on the road, I also know what the car is keeping its eyes on, and it means that I can prepare for any eventualities a lot easier. And the unique feature that I found in this car that I have not yet seen in any other vehicle with any kind of semi-autonomous driving capabilities is the fact that this steering wheel is capacitive touch, I think. I say I think because there are actually sensors built into the driver display in front of me, where there's a camera on my eyes and infrared lights again to help illuminate for the camera so it knows whether or not I'm paying attention. But it also means that this capacitive steering wheel results in me just resting my hand on the wheel and the car knows that I'm paying attention. I know this sounds like a very small matter, but a lot of vehicles with level 2 semi-autonomy tend to scream at me because when I hold the steering wheel, I hold the steering wheel quite lightly, so it doesn't actually know that, I've got this weight on the wheel. Whereas in this, I can just rest my hand here, or because it's a 2-spoke steering wheel, I can put my hand right underneath the steering wheel boss, and the car will just do its thing, which I absolutely love. And because of the range of about 400 kilometers, it does mean that you can do proper long distance drives in this. So for example, you should be able to go from KL to Penang on a single charge if you drive reasonably, and if you drive unreasonably, you might need a quick stop off in Ipoh. And to me, that seems to be like the sweet spot, because in terms of the performance and comfort, this is very clearly a worthy contender compared to other, not just EVs, but other internal combustion SUVs, because if you're driving this for the most part to go to and from work and do the daily grind, this car has enough performance and range and space and practicality that you'd ever need, provided you can charge at home. But if you want to go touring, as one might in a large SUV, then this car can do that too. And that to me is something that's very impressive because of the large battery pack that this car comes with. And that brings me on to charging, because as I said, over the 6 days I had this car, I've done about 1,200 kilometers, which obviously is more than what this car can do in a single charge. And so I've had to visit a couple of DC fast chargers because unfortunately I live in a condominium and I don't have access to a 3-pin socket or a wall box. So this car does DC fast charging at up to 150 kilowatts, while AC charging is up to 11 kilowatts. So what that means is if you have an AC wall box at home, you can dial it up. If it's a 3-phase wall box, you can dial it up all the way up to 11 kilowatts at 36 amps, and that will allow you to charge the car most efficiently on AC charging. Now, for AC charging, a full charge takes about 7 hours from 0 to 100, although 1, nobody ever arrives at home with 0, and 2, nobody ever charges to 100. So realistically, you only need about 4 or 5 hours to charge, and if you're just going back and forth from work, maybe a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours will be enough to replenish the battery. Now, with a DC fast charger of up to 150 kilowatts, which I managed to experience because BMW's headquarters has a 180 kilowatt high power charger, you can charge this car theoretically from 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. But that depends on a lot of different factors. So as many of you know, when it comes to batteries, you have to precondition them before you fast charge because they need to be at an optimum temperature in order to receive the most amount of electrons and whatever in order for it to charge quickly. Now, the car is supposed to be able to do this automatically, where if you input the location of a DC fast charger through the map, it will precondition the battery because it knows that you are about to DC fast charge. Now, the trouble with that is BMW's office in Cyberjaya is not listed as a DC fast charge location on the map. And as such, I couldn't precondition the car when I got there, number one. Number two, I have a suspicion that their DC fast charger is set up to only do 90 kilowatts per nozzle. So there's 2 guns at their DCFC, and I think it's specified to 90 to 90 because the car was telling me that 150 was not possible. So there's a lot of factors involved. But anyway, so I went to the DC fast charger multiple times over the weekend because again, I don't have any charging facilities available to me. And what I noticed was from about 20 to 80%, it could be done at, I think it was anywhere between 90 to 120 kilowatts. It would take about half an hour, which is plenty fast because at 80% that gives me about 320 to 350 kilometers of range, which is more than enough for most people to cover a weekend even. But if you want to go to the full 100%, that last 20% on that fast charger, because it will start to slow down, will take about 20 to 30 minutes more. So that kind of provides a little bit of commentary of how charging works. And that's why, for example, when you have an EV and you're doing a long distance drive and you arrive at a DC fast charger to continue your journey, you only want to stop for up until the car can reach up to 80%, because after that it gets significantly less efficient. But as far as I'm concerned, having the DC fast charger sort of near to where I am, all the way out here in Cyberjaya, did mean that I had a degree of convenience. And it gave me an understanding of how life might be like with one of these if you don't have a charger at home. So I understand that charging takes a little bit longer than it would to refuel. And at the moment, because of where infrastructure is right now, it does require a degree of planning to be able to do long distance drives, but it is by no means impossible. With apps like PlugShare and a better route planner, you can pick your routes more efficiently and plan your charging stops more efficiently, so you never surprised by your state of charge, for example. And as EV infrastructure continues to grow via players like Gantari and Charge EV and so on, we will have fewer roadblocks in terms of EV ownership. If you were to ask me today in a BMW iX, would I drive from here to Penang? Probably not, because I drive quite quickly, and so that means I know I won't be able to get 400 kilometers out of a single charge, which means I probably need to stop somewhere along the way. And I have done a bit of research, and Ipoh does not seem to have a DC fast charger at the moment. So that does mean that I will run out of juice a lot sooner, and I will be in search of some way to continue my journey, and obviously an AC charger will not be good enough, and so the network kind of holds me back. That said though, would I have a BMW iX day to day? Definitely. Because compared to my favorite large SUV, which is the Volvo XC90, this is quieter than an XC90, it's more refined than an XC90, and arguably it turns more heads than an XC90, albeit for all the wrong reasons. And if I don't need the third row of seats, which is the XC90's party piece, because you can put adults back there, this would be the sort of SUV that I'd want, because I like the idea of coming home and charging my car and then waking up in the morning with as much range as I ever need. And does that mean that I may need to consider getting another car for when I want to do long distance drives? Sure. But then again, most Malaysian households, especially ones that can afford a 425,000 ringgit SUV, will probably have more than one car anyway, which means one of those cars can be swapped over to electric like this without much hindrance. And in fact, if you absolutely do not want to charge your car at home, I know for a fact that with a 400-kilometer EV, like an Ioniq 5 for example, you never need to charge your car at home. You can rely on public charging facilities and never charge your car at home. And with a range like this, you only need to charge your car maybe once or twice a week, which to me, I think seems like a very cost and time efficient way to manage things. And would I recommend this over some large SUVs? Well, if you spend a lot of time doing motorway miles and that sort of thing, then you may want something with an internal combustion engine, to which end I would recommend vehicles like BMW's X5 or indeed a Volvo XC90. But if you're spending a lot of your time on the road in town, if your trips are largely predictable and you're not really the sort of person that does a lot of touring, then a BMW iX will be great for you. In any case, that's been our review of the 2022 BMW iX xDrive40 Sport. That's quite a mouthful. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe. Jangan bodoh.